Most people are conditioned from the time they are young to play it safe, to avoid risks, to stick with what is predictable, comfortable, and secure, as if the greatest goal in life is to simply survive without rocking the boat. But the truth is that this very mindset is what prevents progress on every level, personal, professional, and societal, because safety is not actually safe. It is an illusion of security that slowly erodes potential, kills creativity, and guarantees mediocrity. If you look at the arc of human progress, nothing meaningful was ever created by those who decided to take the well-worn road. The airplane was not invented by men who thought staying on the ground was safer. Electricity was not harnessed by people who believed candles were good enough, and rockets were not launched by people content to say that space travel was too dangerous to attempt. Playing it safe is, ironically, the biggest gamble of all, because when you cling to safety, what you are really doing is outsourcing your future to chance, hoping the world will not change too much, hoping disruption will not come, hoping innovation will not replace you. But history shows us that disruption always comes, and those who play it safe are the first to be left behind. Think of Kodak, a company that once dominated the photography world. They invented the digital camera yet refused to push it forward because they were afraid it would disrupt their profitable film business, and by playing it safe, they lost everything. Think of Blockbuster, a company that owned movie rentals around the world. They had the chance to buy Netflix for a few $1 million, but decided against it because it seemed too risky, and by playing it safe, they collapsed into irrelevance while Netflix became a global giant. Safety in this sense is not a shield, it is a slow poison. And yet, the psychology of most individuals mirrors these corporations. They stay in jobs they hate because at least the paycheck is steady. They avoid pursuing ideas that excite them because what if it fails? They silence their ambitions because they fear the judgment of others. And in doing so, they guarantee that their lives become predictable, not in the sense of stability, but in the sense of stagnation. Elon Musk once said that failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough, and this principle is as true for individuals as it is for companies. If you never fail, it means you never tried anything hard enough, bold enough, or meaningful enough to test the boundaries of what is possible. Playing it safe doesn't just rob you of success, it robs you of growth. Because growth requires friction, it requires resistance, it requires the willingness to step into uncertainty where you cannot predict the outcome but you can guarantee the learning. People confuse comfort with security, but comfort zones are not safe zones. They are cages that trick you into believing you are free while locking you into the smallest version of yourself. The irony is that people who avoid risks to stay safe end up facing the greatest risk of all: regret. At the end of life, people rarely regret failing, but they almost always regret not trying, not daring, not pushing beyond the boundaries of what was certain. And that is the tragedy of playing it safe. You may survive, but you will never truly live. Look at Musk's ventures: PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, the Boring Company. Every single one was ridiculed, mocked, and declared impossible at the beginning. Building a private rocket company? Absurd. Creating mass-market electric cars? Doomed to fail. Digging tunnels to solve traffic? A joke. And yet, by refusing to play it safe, by choosing to risk ridicule, bankruptcy, and failure, he built companies that are literally shaping the future of humanity. The lesson here is not that everyone should build rockets or electric cars, but that everyone must recognize that the cost of safety is invisible until it is too late. By choosing comfort today, you sacrifice potential tomorrow. By choosing certainty now, you mortgage your future growth. The world is evolving at exponential speed, driven by technology, globalization, and shifting cultures. And if you think safety is in clinging to the past, you are already obsolete. Playing it safe is betting against the future. Risk is not optional. It is the ticket to relevance. The question is not whether you will face risk, but whether you will face chosen risk. Risks aligned with your vision, your values, and your goals, or whether you will face imposed risk. Risks that come when you cling to the illusion of safety until change blindsides you. The difference between the two is agency. When you take risks intentionally, you grow, you learn, you adapt, you increase your capacity. When you avoid risks and hope the world spares you, you end up in situations you did not choose, with outcomes you cannot control. So when you think of safety, understand it as the most dangerous gamble you can make, because in a world defined by evolution, the refusal to change is a death sentence. And here's the critical shift. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you must begin to ask, "What if I succeed?" Instead of asking, "What if I lose everything?" You must ask, what if I waste everything by never trying? Fear makes people exaggerate the cost of failure and underestimate the cost of inaction. Failure hurts in the moment, but it heals and teaches. Inaction doesn't hurt immediately, but it decays your life quietly until one day you wake up and realize the chance to become who you were meant to be has expired. Playing it safe guarantees that you will live in someone else's story, because those who dare are the ones who write the future, and those who cling to safety are the ones forced to adapt to it after it's already too late. Playing it safe is not survival, it is surrender. And if you want to build a life of meaning, impact, and legacy, the very first thing you must abandon is the illusion that safety is your friend. Safety is the enemy of progress, and progress is the only true security there is. Because in progress you adapt, you expand, you evolve, and you create a future in which you are not merely surviving but thriving. If there is one thing that terrifies most people more than risk, it is failure, the idea of trying and falling short, of putting yourself out there and being exposed, judged, or ridiculed. But what most never realize is that failure is not the opposite of success. It is the engine that powers it, the necessary friction that sharpens your skills, strengthens your resilience, and forces you to innovate in ways comfort never will. Look at every major breakthrough in human history, and you will find a trail of failures leading up to it. Thomas Edison did not magically invent the light bulb in one glorious attempt. He failed thousands of times, and famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." SpaceX did not succeed in landing reusable rockets on the first try. The first Falcon 1 launches literally exploded, each failure burning millions of dollars, each one followed by media ridicule, declaring the company finished. And yet, instead of retreating to safety, Musk doubled down, treating each failure as a data set, as fuel, as information to refine the design, and that very process turned what was once a fantasy into a reality that is now lowering the cost of space travel and pushing humanity toward Mars. This is the paradox. Failure looks like destruction from the outside, but on the inside, it is construction. It is the tearing down of weak assumptions, bad habits, faulty strategies, and replacing them with better ones forged in the fire of experience. The reason most people never break through is not because they fail, but because they never give themselves permission to fail enough. Schools train us to avoid mistakes at all costs, jobs penalize errors, society glorifies perfection, and as a result we are conditioned to treat failure as shame, when in reality it is signal, it is feedback, it is progress disguised as pain. Musk himself has said that if things are not failing, you are not innovating enough, because true innovation means moving into uncharted territory where the answers are not obvious and the path has no map, which means mistakes are not just likely but inevitable. The only people who do not fail are the ones who never try anything outside their comfort zone, and by avoiding failure, they also avoid growth, evolution, and greatness. Think of how children learn to walk. They fall, stumble, hit the ground again and again, yet each fall is not final. It is formative, because with each failure their body calibrates balance, coordination, strength, and eventually walking becomes effortless, even though it began in endless failure. Adults forget this truth and treat failure as final instead of formative, but those who succeed at the highest levels simply never forget that failure is the tuition you pay for mastery. There is no free ride to success, no shortcut around struggle, no way to skip the line and avoid setbacks. The only way forward is through failure. The irony is that most people try to protect themselves from failure, not realizing that in doing so they are protecting themselves from the very thing that would transform them into the person capable of success. Fear of failure kills more dreams than failure itself ever could. You must rewire your mind to see failure, not as a dead end but as a launch pad, not as proof of inadequacy but as proof of courage, proof that you dared to move while others stood still. Every failure teaches you something success never will. Success can make you complacent, arrogant, lazy. Failure humbles you, sharpens you, and forces you to reinvent yourself. Failure teaches you the art of persistence, the discipline of resilience, the necessity of clarity. It makes you ask the hard questions. What didn't work? Why didn't it work? How do I adjust? How do I evolve? Failure is feedback, and feedback is fuel. If you're not failing, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're already dying in slow motion. Musk faced bankruptcy when Tesla nearly collapsed in 2008. He invested his last remaining money, splitting it between Tesla and SpaceX, both of which were bleeding cash, both of which were called doomed by every so-called expert. And yet, by leaning into failure, by enduring the pain, by learning from each setback, those companies are now revolutionizing the auto industry and space exploration. If he had chosen to play it safe, none of it would exist. That is the brutal, but liberating truth. Failure is the price of building something that matters. You cannot avoid it. You cannot outsource it. You cannot escape it. You can only choose whether to use it as fuel or to let it burn you. The people who succeed are not the ones who avoid failure, but the ones who collect it, study it, extract every lesson, and keep moving. They see failure as tuition, not tragedy. They see it as evolution, not embarrassment. And that shift in perspective is what separates the ones who make history from the ones who simply read about it. If you want to build anything meaningful, you must train yourself to run toward failure, not away from it. You must develop a bias for action that values progress over perfection, momentum over paralysis, learning over image. Stop asking how to avoid mistakes. Start asking how fast you can learn from them. Because the truth is, the faster you fail, the faster you adapt, and the faster you adapt, the closer you get to success. Playing it safe guarantees slow death. Failing forward guarantees growth. Failure is not the end. It is the ignition. One of the greatest illusions holding people back from progress is the obsession with the perfect plan. The idea that if you just think long enough, analyze every possibility, research every variable, and anticipate every risk, then someday you'll be ready to move. But that someday never comes, because the more you wait for perfection, the further away you drift from reality. The world is not static, markets shift, technology evolves, competition adapts, and by the time your perfect plan is ready, it's already obsolete. What separates those who actually change the world from those who only dream about it is not flawless planning but relentless execution, the willingness to move forward even when the data isn't complete, even when the risks aren't fully calculated, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. Musk has often said that one of the biggest mistakes people make is spending too much time debating instead of doing, because while you're trapped in endless meetings polishing presentations, someone else is already testing, failing, learning, and iterating. Action beats analysis every single time, not because analysis is useless, but because analysis without action is paralysis. Tesla didn't become the leader in electric vehicles because they had the most perfect business plan. In fact, the original plan looked insane: launch a sports car in a market dominated by giants, scale to sedans in an industry with razor-thin margins, build charging infrastructure when no one believed people would adopt EVs. None of it was perfect. It was audacious, messy, full of near-death moments, but they executed, relentlessly, one problem at a time, solving supply chain bottlenecks, pushing through design failures, navigating financial crises, and through sheer action built momentum that no plan alone could have produced. Plans are useful, but momentum is priceless. Most people think they need confidence before they act, but the truth is confidence only comes after action. You don't wait to be ready. You act to become ready. You don't wait for the map. You draw it by moving. That is why action is the most valuable currency in life. Every step you take, even if it is clumsy, creates clarity. Every experiment you run, even if it fails, gives you data. Every risk you accept, even if it hurts, gives you resilience. Waiting gives you nothing. People waste years waiting for the right partner, the right funding, the right conditions, while those who move build momentum, attract partners through their progress, draw funding through results, and create conditions others thought impossible. Musk didn't wait for governments to build charging stations before launching Tesla. He built them himself. He didn't wait for NASA to fully support private space ventures before pushing SpaceX. He forced the world to pay attention by proving rockets could work. He didn't wait for global consensus before starting Neuralink or the Boring Company. He acted, tested, failed, iterated, and built proof that created belief. That's the formula. Move first, adjust later, learn faster than anyone else. The world rewards speed and courage far more than it rewards caution and perfection. Look at history. The Wright brothers were not the most educated or well-funded team working on flight. They were bicycle mechanics with relentless action, and they beat out institutions with far more resources because they acted, tested, adjusted while the others overanalyzed. NASA didn't land a man on the moon because they had perfect certainty. They did it because they were willing to risk, to launch, to learn in real time, to solve problems on the fly, and that courage created history. The same principle applies to you. Whatever your vision is, stop waiting for perfect. Stop convincing yourself you need more information, more degrees, more approval. You don't. What you need is momentum. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates feedback. Feedback creates improvement, and improvement creates mastery. It's a chain reaction that begins with one simple choice: move. The perfect plan is a myth. There will never be a time when all the variables line up, when risk disappears, when doubt vanishes. If you wait for that moment, you will die waiting. The irony is that your so-called perfect plan will only be revealed by imperfect action. Musk calls it physics first principles, meaning you break problems down to their most fundamental truths, and then you build upward by testing reality directly instead of relying on assumptions. You don't predict. You experiment. You don't debate endlessly. You launch and adjust. This is how progress is made, by stripping away illusions and forcing reality to respond to your actions. People fear looking foolish, making mistakes in public, being judged, but the truth is nobody remembers your failures for long. They remember your breakthroughs. They remember what you dared to do. They remember that you moved while others hesitated. The Wright brothers are remembered for flying, not for the hundreds of crashes. SpaceX is remembered for landing rockets, not for the early explosions. Tesla is remembered for Model S and Model 3, not for the many prototypes that failed along the way. History rewards results, not excuses. And results are always the product of relentless action, never endless planning. If you want to build, to create, to rise, you must become obsessed with doing. Meetings must lead to experiments. Ideas must lead to prototypes. Vision must lead to execution. Every day ask yourself, did I move closer to reality, or did I just stay safe in theory? Most people live their entire lives in theory, in someday, in preparation, and someday becomes never. Don't let that be you. Every great achievement begins as an imperfect start. The rocket that takes us to Mars will not be perfect. The first versions of any revolutionary product are not perfect. They are flawed, broken, criticized, doubted, but they exist. They are real. And because they exist, they can be improved. You cannot improve what doesn't exist. That is why your only duty is to act, to create, to move, to produce something real that can be tested, challenged, refined. The world does not belong to those who dream about the perfect plan. It belongs to those who act on imperfect ones and never stop improving them. So if you're waiting, stop. The world will not wait for you. Opportunity will not wait for you. The future will not wait for you. The perfect plan is a trap. Relentless action is freedom. If you want to do anything truly meaningful in this world, you must come to terms with one undeniable truth. Failure is not the opposite of success, it is the raw material of success. Every breakthrough, every leap forward, every world-changing invention has been built on a mountain of failures, mistakes, crashes, burns, and setbacks. The people who change the world are not those who avoid failure. They are the ones who embrace it, dissect it, learn from it, and move faster because of it. SpaceX didn't land rockets on ships because of genius alone. They landed them after watching rocket after rocket explode, fail mid-flight, collapse on the landing pad, costing hundreds of millions of dollars. Most people would have quit after the first or second disaster. Elon Musk almost did. After 3 failed launches, SpaceX was running out of money, credibility, and time. Everyone laughed, called it impossible, mocked the idea that a private company could do what only governments had ever done. But Musk and his team refused to quit. They took every failure as data. They stripped down every mistake to its first principles, asked why until the problem revealed itself, fixed it, and tried again. On the 4th attempt, when everything was on the line, they succeeded. That single success changed everything. NASA signed contracts, the world began to take them seriously, and history was rewritten. But none of it would have happened without the failures. Failure was not the enemy. Failure was the tuition. Tesla went through the same crucible. The early Roadster was plagued with problems. Production hell almost killed the company. Cash was burning, parts were delayed, critics were brutal, and employees were working insane hours with no guarantee of survival. The company was within weeks of bankruptcy, and Musk himself had to decide whether to use his last remaining money to save Tesla or SpaceX. He split it, risking everything. Had Tesla failed then, it would have been remembered as a bold but doomed idea. Instead, through that period of pain, they pushed through, solved problems no one thought solvable, and laid the foundation for the electric vehicle revolution. The lesson is simple but brutal. If you are not failing, you are not innovating. Playing safe never built rockets, never built electric cars, never colonized planets, never cured diseases. Playing safe builds mediocrity. Failure is proof you are moving. The absence of failure usually means the absence of bold action. That is why Musk has always said failure is an option. If you're not failing, you're not pushing hard enough. The problem is most people fear failure so much they never try. They fear embarrassment, judgment, the sting of loss more than they desire progress. They live smaller lives, take safer jobs, hide behind excuses, and then wonder why their life feels unfulfilled. But here's the truth. You cannot protect yourself from failure without also protecting yourself from growth. To shield yourself from pain is to shield yourself from progress. The very pain you fear is the exact signal that you are moving beyond your comfort zone, that you are pressing against the limits of what you thought possible. Failure hurts, yes, but that hurt is the price of greatness. Think about it. When you learned to walk, you fell hundreds of times. When you learned to ride a bike, you crashed again and again. Did anyone call you a failure then? No, because falling was understood to be part of the process. Yet, as adults, we grow timid, fragile, unwilling to stumble, and so we stop learning, we stop trying, we stop risking, and by doing so, we stop evolving. But evolution demands failure. You cannot create anything new without destroying what came before, and destruction always looks like failure to those who don't understand the process. What people call failure is simply the cost of building something bigger. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't is not talent, not luck, but relationship to failure. Ordinary people see it as final. Extraordinary people see it as feedback. Ordinary people retreat when they fail. Extraordinary people accelerate. If you want to live a life of impact, you must rewire your perception of failure. Stop seeing it as a verdict. See it as information. Stop seeing it as shame. See it as tuition. Stop seeing it as the end. See it as the beginning. Musk once said that being an entrepreneur is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. That image is painful but true. Building something from scratch feels like repeated failure, constant setbacks, endless frustration. But if you endure, if you refuse to let failure break you, you eventually cross the threshold where those failures become your advantage, your edge, your proof that you can take more pain than others, learn faster than others, persist longer than others. That is how breakthroughs are born. Failures compound into experience, and experience compounds into mastery. You cannot shortcut this process. You cannot outsource it. You must earn it, bleed for it, and live through it. And the irony is this: the more you fail, the less power failure has over you. The first time you fall, it feels devastating. The 10th time, you barely flinch. You grow immune. You learn to detach your identity from the outcome. You realize you are not your failure. You are the force that rises after failure. That shift is where true resilience is born. You stop fearing failure and start using it. You begin to seek harder challenges because you know the bigger the failure, the bigger the lesson, the bigger the reward on the other side. That is how you evolve into someone unstoppable. The world is full of people who are smart, talented, even visionary, but they never risk enough to fail, so they never create anything remarkable. They live safe, polished lives, but they die with regret. Don't be one of them. If you want to build something worthy of your potential, you must fail boldly, fail often, fail forward. That doesn't mean being reckless. It means designing systems where failure is part of the process, where every setback is used as fuel, where you iterate fast and cheap until you discover what works. That's how SpaceX operates. That's how Tesla operates. That's how every great innovator operates. The road to greatness is littered with failure. Step on the failures. Don't trip over them. Use them as stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. When you reframe failure, you unlock freedom. The freedom to try without fear. The freedom to innovate without apology. The freedom to live without regret. Remember this: failure is not permanent. Quitting island. Failure is not fatal. Stagnation island. The only way to truly fail is to stop moving. As long as you keep going, you are still in the game, still learning, still evolving. So ask yourself, are you playing small to avoid failure, or are you willing to fail boldly in order to live greatly? Because in the end, the world does not remember those who never failed. It remembers those who failed, and failed, and failed again, until one day they succeeded so massively that it erased every doubt. If you are waiting to feel motivated before you act, you will wait forever. Motivation is a myth. It is an unreliable spark that burns hot for a moment and then vanishes when life gets difficult. People waste years of their lives hoping that one day they will feel ready, inspired, or energized enough to finally chase the life they want. But here is the brutal truth. You will never feel ready. You will never wake up one morning with perfect clarity, perfect energy, and perfect circumstances. Life doesn't work that way. Progress doesn't come from waiting on motivation. Progress comes from discipline. Discipline is the engine that keeps moving when motivation dies. It is the quiet, often boring, daily commitment to do what must be done, regardless of how you feel. And that is where greatness is forged. Elon Musk has never been motivated every day. Do you think he felt inspired during Tesla's production hell, sleeping on the factory floor, eating cold pizza at 3 a.m., working 120 hours a week just to keep the company alive? Do you think he felt a surge of motivation when rockets exploded on the launch pad and critics mocked him for wasting billions? Of course not. But he kept going anyway, not because of motivation, but because of discipline. He had decided who he was and what he was building, and that decision didn't change just because he felt tired, hopeless, or overwhelmed. Motivation depends on feelings. Discipline depends on decisions. The difference is enormous. Feelings fluctuate. They rise and fall with your mood, with your environment, with the weather, with your hormones. If you rely on feelings to drive your life, you will be inconsistent, unstable, unreliable. One day you feel good and you make progress. The next day you feel low and you collapse. That is why most people never break through. They live at the mercy of their emotions. Discipline is different. Discipline is a contract you make with yourself that does not expire when you feel bad. It is the ability to act in alignment with your vision, even when everything in you screams to quit. It is doing the work without applause. It is keeping promises to yourself when no one else would notice if you broke them. It is showing up when you don't feel like it, because you know the future you are building demands it. That is the true separator between average and exceptional. Anyone can act when they feel like it. Very few can act when they don't. But those few are the ones who build empires, launch rockets, and rewrite history. Think of it like a rocket launch. Motivation is like the initial spark that lights the engine, but discipline is the continuous thrust that carries the rocket beyond the atmosphere. Without discipline, you will never escape the gravity of mediocrity. Gravity in this case is the pull of comfort, laziness, distraction, excuses. Everyone feels that gravity. It is strong, and it will pull you down every time, unless you generate enough thrust through discipline to break free. Discipline doesn't mean you never get tired or discouraged. It means you act anyway. It means you set a standard so high that your feelings no longer get a vote. You don't need to feel like waking up early. You just do it. You don't need to feel like working out. You just do it. You don't need to feel like writing, studying, building, calling, leading. You just do it, because the standard you've set for yourself is higher than the mood you're in. This is how you build trust with yourself. Every time you follow through, even when you don't feel like it, you deposit credibility into your identity. And over time, you begin to see yourself as reliable, consistent, unstoppable. That self-image becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You begin to expect results from yourself, and because you expect them, you create them. This is why discipline is freedom. Most people think discipline is restrictive, that it cages you, that it limits your fun. In reality, discipline liberates you. Because when you live by discipline, you are no longer controlled by impulses, addictions, distractions, or the endless chaos of your emotions. You are in control, you decide, that is freedom. Motivation is cheap. Discipline is priceless. Everyone can get motivated. Few can stay disciplined. That is why gyms are full in January and empty in March. That is why dreamers start projects they never finish. That is why most people live in cycles of excitement and disappointment. They ride waves of motivation, but they never build the solid foundation of discipline. Ask yourself, how many times have you waited for motivation to start something? How many times have you told yourself, I'll begin when I feel more ready, when I have more energy, when the timing is right? And how many times did that day never come? Exactly. The only way to break that cycle is to stop waiting and start acting with discipline. Discipline says, I don't wait for the right time. I make this the right time. Discipline says, I don't negotiate with my excuses. I execute regardless of how I feel. Discipline says, I don't need to be inspired. I need to be consistent. That is how transformation happens. Not in moments of motivation, but in daily acts of discipline. Think of the greatest athletes, entrepreneurs, inventors, scientists. They are not motivated every day. They are disciplined every day. They have built habits that run even when their emotions don't cooperate. They don't rely on energy. They rely on systems. They don't rely on luck. They rely on standards. And those standards compound into extraordinary results. Motivation gets you started. Discipline gets you finished. The world doesn't care about what you start. It cares about what you finish. History doesn't remember the person who had a great idea but quit. It remembers the one who had the same idea but kept going until it was real. That is discipline. Discipline is not glamorous. It doesn't look exciting on social media. It is boring, repetitive, unsexy. But that is exactly why it works. Because while everyone else chases excitement, the disciplined ones quietly build unstoppable momentum. And when that momentum compounds, it looks like sudden success to outsiders. But there is nothing sudden about it. It is built brick by brick, day after day, choice after choice, by someone who refused to wait for motivation and chose discipline instead. The future belongs to those who are willing to act without feelings. The ones who understand that emotions are whether temporary, shifting, unpredictable, but discipline is climate, steady, reliable, and long-term. If you can master discipline, you can build anything. Without it, you will build nothing lasting. Motivation is cheap fuel that evaporates quickly. Discipline is nuclear energy that powers you for life. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting to feel inspired. Stop waiting for the mood to strike. Set your standards, lock them in, and act on them every day. That is the only way to build the life you want. In the end, discipline is the ultimate freedom because it makes you unstoppable. And the world belongs to the unstoppable. Most people live their lives trapped in short-term loops, chasing the next paycheck, the next weekend, the next dopamine hit from a notification. They treat their existence like a series of sprints, always reacting to immediate demands, never pausing to see the bigger picture of where they're actually heading. And then they wonder why years pass, why their lives don't change, why they feel stuck in the same cycles despite all the busyness. The reason is simple. They are playing a short-term game in a long-term world. Everything meaningful in life, wealth, impact, innovation, mastery comes from compounding, and compounding only works for those who think long-term. Elon Musk didn't build Tesla in a year. SpaceX didn't land rockets after a few months. Neuralink didn't appear overnight. These things required years of persistence, sacrifice, and vision. And yet, people expect results instantly. They plant seeds and get impatient when a forest doesn't grow in a week. But life doesn't bend to impatience. Life rewards those who align with long-term laws. Long-term thinking is not about waiting for decades with no action. It's about building systems, habits, and visions today that compound into exponential results tomorrow. If you're only thinking about this week, you'll make decisions that comfort you now but destroy you later. If you're thinking in decades, you'll make decisions that may hurt now but liberate you later. And that difference is everything. Look at money. Most people chase quick cash. They fall for schemes, gamble on trends, jump from one job to another without building a foundation. They're addicted to short-term hits. But the wealthy understand that true financial freedom comes from compounding investments, consistent discipline, and the patience to allow time to multiply their decisions. 10 years of patience can do more for your wealth than 10,000 hours of grinding and panic. The same principle applies to health. People crash diet, do extreme workouts, then quit when it gets hard. But health is not built in weeks. It is built in years of consistent choices. The same with relationships, careers, skills. Everything worth anything requires long-term commitment. But here is the problem. Our brains are wired for the short term. We evolved to survive immediate threats, to find food now, to avoid danger now. That wiring doesn't serve us in a world where survival isn't about avoiding predators but about building a future. So if you want to rise above average, you must rewire yourself for long-term thinking. You must force yourself to live for tomorrow, not just for today. You must ask, how will this decision compound in 10 years? Not just how does it make me feel in 10 minutes? That question changes everything. Imagine you're offered two options, comfort today or growth that pays off years from now. The average person picks comfort because they can't delay gratification. The exceptional person chooses growth because they know the long-term payoff is worth the short-term pain. Elon Musk once said he didn't start Tesla to get rich. He started it to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. That's a decades-long mission. Who thinks like that? Almost no one. And that's why almost no one changes the world. When you start thinking long-term, you stop wasting time on things that don't matter. Gossip doesn't matter. Short-term wins don't matter. Instant gratification doesn't matter. What matters is, will this action move me closer to my 10-year vision? Will it compound into something exponential, or will it fade in a few days? If it doesn't compound, it's noise. Cut it. Long-term thinking also makes you unstoppable in the face of failure, because when you think short-term, failure looks final. You try once, it doesn't work, you quit. But when you think long-term, failure is just feedback. It's a data point, part of the process, a necessary step on the timeline of growth. That's why Elon Musk didn't quit after rockets exploded. He wasn't playing a one-year game, he was playing a 50-year game. And in a 50-year game, a few failures mean nothing. This is why long-term thinkers always win. They simply outlast everyone else. They keep showing up while the short-term players burn out. They survive long enough to see compounding kick in. That is the secret. The future belongs to those who can delay gratification long enough for compounding to transform their small actions into massive results. The irony is this: long-term thinking actually makes today easier, because when you stop expecting instant results, you remove the pressure that suffocates most people. You understand that greatness takes time, so you focus on building the right systems instead of chasing quick wins. You measure success not by what happens this week, but by whether you stayed consistent with your principles. That shift gives you peace. It allows you to focus deeply today, knowing that time is your ally. The problem with most people is they treat time like an enemy. They're always in a rush, always panicking, always wishing success would come faster. But time is the greatest multiplier in existence if you work with it instead of against it. Think of a rocket. At launch, it burns massive fuel to break gravity. Progress is slow, painful, energy intensive. That's the first years of any journey. But once the rocket escapes the atmosphere, momentum carries it forward with far less effort. That's compounding. At first, progress is invisible, then it's unstoppable. But only for those who last long enough to see it. Most quit too soon. They plant seeds, water them for a few weeks, and give up before the roots even form. They change strategies, abandon visions, switch paths endlessly, never staying long enough to see the harvest. That is why long-term thinkers win. They know you don't dig up seeds to check if they're growing. You trust the process. You keep watering. You keep showing up. And eventually, the forest grows. The difference between mediocrity and greatness is not talent. It's patience. Talent without patience is wasted. Vision without patience is fantasy. But patience combined with discipline and long-term thinking is unstoppable. The world is designed to distract you, to make you think short-term. Social media, consumer culture, endless noise. Everything is pushing you to seek instant gratification. That is the trap. If you want to build something great, you must step outside of that trap. You must become immune to the addiction of immediacy. You must think in years, not weeks. In decades, not days. You must train your mind to see beyond the horizon. Long-term thinking is a superpower. It separates the leaders from the followers, the creators from the consumers, the legends from the forgotten. Because when you live long-term, you no longer make decisions based on fear or comfort. You make them based on legacy. And legacy is the only game worth playing. So, the question is simple. Are you living for the short term or the long term? Are you chasing dopamine or building destiny? Are you stuck in cycles or compounding toward greatness? If you want to be exceptional, you already know the answer. Stop thinking in weeks. Start thinking in decades. Stop chasing speed. Start chasing compounding. Stop living for comfort. Start living for legacy. Because in the end, the future doesn't belong to the talented or the lucky. It belongs to the long-term thinkers. Innovation is one of those words people like to throw around in boardrooms, on conference stages, and in self-help books, as if it were some mystical spark that only visits a chosen few in a rare moment of inspiration. But the truth is, innovation is not a lightning strike. It's not a single idea that suddenly changes everything. It's a mindset, a way of approaching the world, a habit of refusing to accept reality as fixed. Innovation is the belief that everything around you is malleable, that problems are puzzles waiting to be solved, that limitations are temporary constructs until someone bold enough decides to challenge them. Elon Musk has been called an innovator not because he had one good idea, but because he trained his mind to keep questioning assumptions, to keep breaking problems down into first principles, to keep pushing until what was once impossible becomes inevitable. That's the mindset you must adopt if you want to build a life or career that actually matters. Most people live inside inherited scripts. They accept things as they are, saying, that's just how it's done, or that's just how the world works. They never stop to ask, but why? That one question is the seed of all innovation. Why does it have to be this way? Why can't we do it differently? Why can't I challenge the norm? From that seed grows every breakthrough. The car didn't have to run on gas. Rockets didn't have to be single use. Energy didn't have to be dirty. Innovation begins with the refusal to accept default settings. If you want to innovate in your own life, you have to start by refusing to accept mediocrity as normal. Refuse to believe that just because no one around you has built wealth, you can't. Refuse to accept that because your job or your city or your background is limited, your future must be too. Innovation is not just for inventors and engineers. It is for anyone who wants to live differently than the script handed to them. To innovate means to take responsibility for reality instead of being a passive consumer of it. That's why so few people truly innovate, because it's easier to conform than to question. But everything changes the moment you stop asking, what can I do with what I have, and start asking, what would be possible if I removed the assumptions? This is called first principles thinking. Instead of reasoning by analogy, copying what's been done, you strip a problem down to its fundamental truths and rebuild from there. It's the difference between saying batteries are too expensive for electric cars because they always have been, and asking, what actually makes up the cost of a battery, and can we redesign the process to lower it? That shift in thinking is what makes Tesla possible, and you can apply the same process to your own obstacles. Don't just accept that you're bad at money because you always have been. Break it down. Why? Where did the belief start? What makes it true? Can you rebuild it with new knowledge and habits? That's innovation applied to your own life. Innovation also requires resilience, because most new ideas fail before they succeed. The world resists change, institutions resist disruption, people resist being uncomfortable, so the innovator is always swimming upstream at first. You will be doubted, you will be ridiculed, you will be told it can't work. Elon Musk was laughed at for launching rockets with private money. He was mocked for making electric cars when oil companies ruled the world. But now, those very ideas have reshaped industries. The ridicule always comes before the respect. That's the cost of being an innovator. So you must decide if you'd rather be comfortable with conformity or uncomfortable with progress. There is no middle ground. Another crucial truth. Innovation is not about tools, it's about perspective. Give two people the same resources, money, time, access. One will repeat the same old patterns, the other will find a way to transform the landscape. The difference is not the tool set, it's the mindset. Innovation asks, what's missing here? What's possible here? What can I build that no one else is bold enough to attempt? If you practice asking those questions every day, your brain starts to wire itself for solutions instead of excuses. You stop seeing obstacles as walls and start seeing them as blueprints for new doors. That is the innovator's advantage. Innovation also thrives in environments where failure is treated as feedback, not shame. The faster you test, the faster you learn. That's why iterative experimentation is critical. Don't wait for the perfect idea. Build, test, fail, learn, improve, repeat. This is how rockets land. This is how new companies disrupt old giants. And this is how you reinvent yourself. The innovator's path is never smooth, but it is always worth it. Because the moment you solve a problem in a way no one else dared to try, you create asymmetric value. Meaning, the effort you put in is multiplied far beyond what most people consider possible. That is the payoff of innovation. Another thing most people don't realize, innovation is not about technology. Technology is just a tool. True innovation is about courage. The courage to be misunderstood. The courage to act without a guarantee. The courage to step into the unknown without a map. Without courage, innovation dies before it's born. That means if you want to live innovatively, you must train your tolerance for uncertainty. You must get comfortable with looking foolish. You must be willing to say, I don't know if this will work, but I'm going to try anyway. That is how all breakthroughs begin. Look at your own life right now. Where are you playing it safe? Where are you following outdated rules? Where are you assuming that the way it's been is the way it must be? Those are your invitations to innovate. Redesign your routines. Reinvent your habits, rethink your relationships, break problems into first principles, and rebuild them on your terms. When you innovate on your own life, you stop waiting for opportunities and start creating them. That is the essence of power. And here's the ultimate truth. Innovation compounds. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Each time you challenge an assumption, you strengthen the muscle. Each time you take a risk, you increase your capacity. Each time you survive a failure, you expand your resilience. Over time, innovation stops being something you do and becomes who you are. And when it becomes who you are, you stop fearing change and start driving it. You stop being at the mercy of the future and start shaping it. That is the life of the innovator. Not someone who waits for inspiration, but someone who chooses to live with a mindset that says, everything can be reimagined. Innovation is not reserved for Silicon Valley. It is not reserved for billionaires. It is not reserved for geniuses. It is available to anyone who dares to question, dares to act, and dares to keep going when the world says no. You don't have to build rockets to innovate. You can innovate in how you think, how you live, how you love, how you work. The question is not, am I innovative? The question is, am I willing to stop accepting the world as it is and start building it as it could be? The moment you answer yes, you've already stepped into the mindset that creates breakthroughs. And that mindset is more valuable than any idea, because ideas are fragile, but a mindset of innovation, that is unbreakable. When people talk about success, they often glamorize the vision of big wins, breakthroughs, or the perfect timing that seems to make someone unstoppable. But the truth is, success is rarely about the highlight moments. It is forged in the invisible discipline of daily repetition, the resilience to stand back up after each setback, and the relentless refusal to quit when every excuse to stop is available. Elon Musk didn't become who he is because he had one clever idea. He became who he is because he learned how to stay in the fight longer than anyone else, how to keep working through pain, doubt, and failure until reality had no choice but to yield. And that's exactly the kind of mindset you must adopt if you want to build something meaningful, whether in your career, your finances, or your life. Discipline is not about doing something once with intensity. It's about showing up every single day with consistency. Anyone can work hard when they feel motivated. The difference between average and exceptional is who keeps going when the motivation dies, when the applause fades, when no one is watching. Discipline is the bridge between your vision and its reality. Without it, your dreams remain concepts. With it, your dreams become inevitabilities. And the truth is, discipline isn't glamorous. It's waking up early when you don't want to. It's saying no to distractions when everyone else says yes. It's choosing the long term over the short term, even when it feels unbearable. That is why so few people develop it, because it demands sacrifice. But sacrifice is the price of freedom. If you refuse to sacrifice for your future, you end up sacrificing your future by default. Resilience is the twin force that keeps discipline alive. Because no matter how much discipline you cultivate, life will test you with setbacks. You will fail. You will face rejection. You will lose money, lose relationships, lose opportunities. The weak see these moments as evidence that they're not cut out for greatness. The resilient see them as feedback. They understand that failure is not the opposite of success, but the process of it. Rockets explode before they land, businesses collapse before they thrive, ideas get mocked before they change the world. If you cannot endure the humiliation of failure, you will never taste the exhilaration of breakthrough. Resilience is built every time you choose to rise again, when the ground feels safer. Every time you choose to keep building, when your energy screams for rest. Every time you stare down doubt and decide that even if you fail again, it won't be the end of your story. That is resilience in action. The relentless pursuit of the future ties discipline and resilience together. It's not enough to have vision if you're not willing to bleed for it. It's not enough to be tough if you don't know what you're fighting for. Relentlessness is the refusal to settle, the daily decision to keep stretching toward a future most people can't even imagine. Musk once said he would rather die on Mars than live a comfortable life on Earth. That's not a slogan. That's a mindset. It's a reminder that the future belongs to those who are willing to risk, sacrifice, and endure for something larger than themselves. The relentless don't wait for conditions to be perfect. They move forward in imperfection. They don't wait for permission. They act without consensus. They don't stop when things are hard. They understand that hard is the path. The moment you embrace relentlessness is the moment you stop negotiating with your excuses. You stop asking if you feel like it and start asking if it serves your mission. You stop waiting for easy and start demanding what's necessary. And when you live this way, progress compounds. Each day of discipline stacks on the next. Each moment of resilience makes you stronger for the next setback. Each act of relentless pursuit pulls the future closer. Before long, you look back and realize you've crossed distances others thought impossible, not because you were smarter, but because you refused to stop. Most people underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade because they overestimate what they should accomplish in a day. Discipline and resilience correct that imbalance. They allow you to take small steps daily without collapsing under the weight of instant results. They allow you to hold the line even when results lag behind effort. And they allow you to play the long game in a world addicted to short-term gratification. Think about your own life right now. Where are you negotiating with yourself? Where are you quitting too early? Where are you choosing comfort over consistency? Those are the cracks where your potential leaks. And those cracks are sealed only with discipline, only with resilience, only with relentlessness. There is no shortcut. There is no hack. There is only the decision to stay in the game longer than anyone else. If you want to rise, you must train your mind and body to withstand discomfort without surrender. You must embrace boredom, because greatness often looks like repetition. You must embrace pain, because breakthroughs are born in it. You must embrace solitude, because most won't understand what you're doing until after it works. And when you live this way, you begin to develop an identity that cannot be shaken. You stop saying, I'll try, and start saying, I will. You stop asking, how long will this take? And start asking, how far can I go? You stop needing external validation and start respecting yourself for the consistency you've built. That's when discipline becomes freedom, resilience becomes strength, and relentlessness becomes inevitability. Don't wait for someone to push you. Push yourself. Don't wait for the right time. Make the time right by acting now. Don't wait for results before believing. Believe first, then act until results have no choice but to appear. That is the formula for the relentless. That is the way forward if you want to live a life that leaves a mark. Innovation is not a buzzword. It is survival. In a world that changes faster each year, where entire industries rise and collapse in a decade, the only real risk is refusing to innovate. Yet most people still cling to outdated systems, repeating old habits, relying on what once worked because it feels safe. But the truth is, safety is an illusion, and the greatest danger you face is the comfort of familiarity. Look at every breakthrough in human history, and you'll see the same pattern. Someone decided that the rules everyone else accepted as permanent were actually temporary. Someone refused to obey gravity as it was taught and instead built machines that flew. Someone refused to accept that space was unreachable and built rockets to pierce the atmosphere. Someone refused to settle for gas engines and began designing electric cars when the industry laughed. That someone in many cases was Elon Musk, and his example proves the same point. Innovation is not about genius. It is about courage. The courage to look ridiculous, the courage to risk failure, the courage to spend years being misunderstood, until suddenly the world calls you a visionary. Risk and innovation are married. They cannot be separated. If you want to innovate without risk, you want the impossible. Every act of creation is an act of exposure, of putting your name, your time, your money, your belief on the line with no guarantee of return. That's why so few people innovate, because they cannot handle the tension of uncertainty. But if you want to rise beyond mediocrity, you must become comfortable with that tension. You must accept that discomfort is not a sign to stop, but a signal that you're doing something most people are too afraid to attempt. The willingness to risk is not recklessness. True risk-taking is disciplined, calculated, and rooted in first principles thinking. Musk didn't build rockets by gambling. He broke the problem down to physics, to materials, to costs, to energy equations, then built upward from there. He risked, but with structure. That is how you must approach your own innovations, whether in business, career, or personal life. Don't follow the crowd, don't obey convention blindly. Break things down to their essence and reconstruct them with clarity. Ask not, what is everyone else doing? But, what is physically possible, what is logically sound, what is necessary to move forward? That is the DNA of innovation. The courage to defy gravity is not just about rockets. It's about refusing to let the weight of your current reality chain you to the ground. Gravity can be your financial struggles, your lack of support, your fear of being mocked. Everyone has their own form of gravity pulling them down, and everyone must decide whether they will let that force dictate their future or whether they will design the engines to break free. Breaking free doesn't happen once. It happens daily. Every time you take a risk others avoid, you ignite your engines. Every time you back your ideas with relentless execution instead of waiting for validation, you lift off. Every time you choose vision over comfort, you rise a little higher. Eventually, You reach escape velocity, the point at which momentum carries you beyond the old pull. But here's the hard part. Most people never reach escape velocity because they cut the engines too early. They start strong but stop when results don't arrive quickly. They launch but retreat at the first sign of turbulence. They speak of innovation but cling to tradition the moment risk feels threatening. That is why you must decide now that you will not quit halfway. You will burn fuel until breakthrough is inevitable. Risk isn't supposed to feel good. Innovation isn't supposed to be applauded at first. If people immediately understand and support your vision, it's probably not bold enough. True innovation requires the willingness to look wrong until time proves you right. And that time can be long, lonely, and brutal. But when you finally cross the threshold, when what once seemed insane becomes the new standard, you will understand that every ounce of ridicule, every sleepless night, every dollar lost was not wasted. It was invested in the gravity-defying leap that only the courageous ever attempt. The key is to redefine what risk means to you. Most people think risk is starting a business, investing money, or speaking a bold idea. But the real risk is staying in the same place, refusing to evolve, repeating the same year of your life until regret becomes unbearable. The real risk is playing it safe until safety itself becomes the prison of your potential. If you want to innovate, you must reverse the logic of the average person. For them, risk is dangerous, and safety is smart. For you, safety must be seen as dangerous, and risk must be seen as the only path to survival. Innovation is not just about technology, it is about mindset. You innovate every time you question an assumption. You innovate every time you test a new approach. You innovate every time you refuse to accept the limits others try to hand you. That is how you build a future worth living in. But remember, innovation is not a one-time event. It is a lifestyle. It requires you to constantly scan the horizon for what is possible, to constantly ask, how can this be better, faster, simpler, more efficient, more impactful? It requires you to never settle into complacency. And the paradox of innovation is that the moment you stop innovating, you start decaying. Risk and innovation also demand resilience, because not every attempt will succeed. In fact, most will fail. SpaceX had multiple rocket explosions before its first successful launch. Tesla was on the brink of bankruptcy more than once. Failure is not evidence you're wrong, it is evidence you are innovating. If you want a guarantee of success, stick to what has already been done. But if you want to lead, you must embrace failure as tuition, the cost of playing at a level where most fear to enter. And when failure hits, as it always does, you must respond not with despair but with data, not with retreat but with recalibration. Innovation requires the humility to learn fast and the courage to keep moving. You cannot innovate if you are fragile. You must become anti-fragile, stronger because of failure, sharper because of criticism, more determined because of rejection. That is the essence of building something new. Ultimately, innovation is the defiance of gravity, and risk is the fuel that powers the engines. Courage is the decision to ignite the countdown even when you cannot see the landing. And relentlessness is the choice to keep the engines firing until you break free. Do not fear risk, fear stagnation. Do not fear looking foolish, fear being forgotten. Do not fear failure, fear the slow death of never trying. Because history does not remember the cautious, it remembers the bold. And if you want your life to matter, if you want your work to resonate, if you want to create something that lasts beyond you, then you must innovate, you must risk, you must dare to defy gravity. When all is said and done, when the years pass, and your work is no longer about the immediate challenges of today, the only thing that truly remains is the impact you leave behind. Legacy is not about monuments, plaques, or people remembering your name in history books. Legacy is the ripple effect of your actions, your ideas, and your courage to build something that outlasts your physical presence. Every human being is born with the choice to live as a consumer of time or as a creator of time, as someone who uses the resources given to them and leaves little trace, or as someone who multiplies those resources into something greater for others to inherit. Building a legacy requires vision larger than comfort, purpose larger than profit, and an obsession with creating value that extends beyond the boundaries of your own lifetime. Elon Musk has often said that his driving force is not money but the desire to ensure humanity becomes a multiplanetary species, because in the long arc of history, that is the only way to secure the survival and expansion of consciousness. That is not a small vision. It is not about quarterly earnings or even personal wealth. It is about aligning your life's work with something that fundamentally shifts the trajectory of humanity. And while not everyone will build rockets or electric cars, Everyone can build their own legacy by asking the deeper question, what am I doing with my short time on this planet that truly matters? Purpose is not found in abstract dreams. It is found in the intersection between your unique capabilities, the problems the world desperately needs solved, and the courage to bridge the two with relentless execution. Legacy begins the moment you stop asking, what do I get out of this? And start asking, what does this create for others long after I am gone? When you build with that mindset, money becomes a byproduct, not the objective. Recognition becomes noise, not the compass. You begin to operate from a state of contribution, and in that state you unlock a power few ever touch, the ability to inspire, to catalyze, to ignite movements larger than yourself. But here's the paradox. Most people never think about legacy because they are too trapped in survival mode, chasing the next paycheck, the next distraction, the next temporary fix. They believe legacy is for the great, the geniuses, the wealthy. That is a lie. Legacy is for anyone who decides to live with intention. A teacher who inspires one child to believe in themselves creates a legacy. A parent who raises a child with resilience and kindness creates a legacy. An entrepreneur who builds a company that solves real problems creates a legacy. You do not need billions to build beyond yourself, but you do need vision, courage, and faith. Purpose and legacy are not optional. They are the very reason you were given imagination. You are not here to simply survive. You are here to build, to create, to expand. The tragedy of modern life is that so many people spend decades living as if their only role is to pay bills, follow orders, and pass quietly into the background. They never dare to claim the truth, that their life is a platform to launch something greater. When you realize this, you stop playing small. You stop wasting time on trivialities. You begin to make decisions not based on what feels good now, but based on what will still matter 10, 20, 50 years from now. And that shift changes everything. Legacy is not built by accident. It is built through deliberate choices stacked daily, choices to innovate rather than imitate, to stand for something rather than blend into everything, to build with durability rather than chase temporary gains. Think about the companies that have endured for centuries. They were built not on the idea of fast profit, but on principles, vision, and service. Now think about the companies that exploded overnight but disappeared just as quickly. They lacked depth. They lacked purpose. They lacked the alignment between mission and execution. The same applies to your life. If your decisions are shallow, your impact will be shallow. But if your decisions are deep, aligned with principles that endure beyond you, your impact will reverberate. Building beyond yourself requires you to answer uncomfortable questions. What problem am I dedicating my life to solving? Is this problem big enough to matter? Am I solving it in a way that expands value not just for me, but for others? And am I willing to persist even when recognition doesn't come? Because legacy is not about applause. It is about the quiet, consistent building of something meaningful. Musk didn't build SpaceX for cheers. He built it because he saw the existential risk of a single planet species. Tesla wasn't built for awards. It was built because the world needed to accelerate sustainable energy. Legacy-driven builders don't wait for permission. They create because they must. They innovate because the alternative is stagnation. They risk because the alternative is irrelevance. And when you begin to live this way, your life becomes more than survival. It becomes a story worth telling, not just now, but in generations to come. Purpose is what keeps you from burning out when the work gets hard. Legacy is what ensures that the fire you burn with today continues to light the path tomorrow. Together, they form the highest motivation a human can live by. And here's the truth few understand. Your legacy is already being written. Every action, every word, every decision is carving the story of who you are and what you leave behind. The question is not whether you will have a legacy. The question is whether it will be one of mediocrity or one of meaning. Will people look back and say, they lived, they worked, and then they were gone? Or will they say, because they dared, my life is different, my world is larger, my future is brighter? That is the decision in front of you every single day. You don't need to wait for someday. You don't need to wait until you're rich, until you're famous, until you feel ready. Legacy is not tomorrow's project. It is today's behavior. It begins the moment you choose to live as someone whose life is bigger than themselves. And when you finally decide to step into that role, you will discover the greatest paradox of all, that in building beyond yourself, you actually find yourself. That in dedicating your energy to something that will outlast you, you finally feel alive in the present. Because humans were never designed for smallness. We were designed for expansion, for vision, for contribution. Your purpose is the engine. Your legacy is the trajectory. And the question that will echo long after you are gone is not, what did you own? But, what did you build? What did you ignite? What did you leave behind that makes the future better than the past? That is the challenge. That is the invitation. And the time to begin is not someday. It is now.